Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Monday, and it is January the 5th, and I'm going to ask your forgiveness right up front. You know when you move things around in your house, maybe you guys don't do this as much as I do, but occasionally you'll be like, oh, I need to redesign the things that are happening. I need to change the layout. And what I decided to do, because I think it's advantageous to the workflow that we do here on this podcast, I moved all the things that I normally keep on one screen onto the other screen and vice versa. And so I flip-flopped, and there is a very high probability that I am going to be backwards for at least a little bit of today's show. But what I found is that I kept looking off screen one direction, and I thought it was really weird because that's where it was. It's opposite on my camera. I'm letting you know that things may be a little wonky for the next couple of days as I kind of like settle into this new layout. But I do think that we've got an important program to be able to discuss, and that is a discussion about liberation. Today is all about liberation, at least for me. The word liberation was bandied about throughout the weekend. The liberation of Venezuela. Apparently, we were able to liberate Venezuela, more on that, before we were able to liberate the Epstein file documents as required by federal law. We were able to liberate Venezuela before we were able to liberate the American taxpayer, the everyday U.S. worker, from paying for fraud and scumbags that have come in here, from funding and financing Somali pirates who have come into our nation. So we're into liberation, just not liberation of the people that voted. I'm going to do an evaluation as a non-foreign policy guy because I'm not a foreign policy guy. That's not my thing. I don't care about geopolitics as a general rule. It's not the most exciting thing to me. And also, more importantly, it's too far away for it to matter. For this guy who lives at the end of a cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood in Texas, America. And so maybe you are in the same boat. Now, if you are of Venezuelan descent and this is really, really important to you for your family members and so on, that's fine. You can have that opinion. It's just not mine. I'm going to evaluate this based on promise, expectation, and then fulfillment of that expectation and promise, which is really straightforward. The question is this: is this what you promised us? And then did you deliver on that promise? And so I'm going to pose a question to you, and I would love it if you guys would weigh in on this very simple thing. I don't think it's that complicated. If you're a MAGA person, and there are many MAGA people who listen to this program, I'm not mad at any of you. If you are in that crowd that you see on the screen right now and you wear the red hat, no big deal. We overlap most of the time. So here's the question. Where on the top 10 list of Donald Trump's promises to you as a future president in his second regime, his second administration, was depose foreign Venezuelan dictator and then run another country? Forget about the oil. Forget about the narco-terrorism argument. I just want to know, where was that on your priority list? When you got out there and said, this is my guy, this is who I'm going to back, this is where my vote is going to go, America first, make America great again, I want to do all those things. Where was liberate Venezuela, high five to Chevron and to Exxon? I just want to know honestly. And then if you've made it something that is part of your agenda because you've listened to people say, well, we needed this, why is that convincing to you? And you're more than welcome to put it in our comments, and I won't censor anybody. I don't do that. I'm interested in why people think that's the case. It bothers me because I watched a guy make an argument that there would be no new wars, that we have moved on from the policy of regime change, that we're not going to do some modified version of the Monroe Doctrine or the Roosevelt Corollary, and you can go back to your high school era and figure out whether or not non-intervention policies in this hemisphere make a ton of sense. And, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but quoting something from 1823 and stating like, this is the way that we're going to work, when the United States was just entering onto the world stage post the Second War with Britain and finally asserting that it was like, a dominant power in the hemisphere, is really not the same when we have a United States that basically is doing the meme video and are trying to be America World Police. I'm not crazy about America World Police because my generation already did that, and I signed up to play that game. We're going to talk about war. We're going to talk about whether or not we're at war. I don't think we are in an active war. I think that we did an act of war, and I think that's really specific. And if you guys don't think that it's an active war, as we get going here, let me just throw this right into your hopper as you consider this. This is going to be something I want you to meditate on throughout the program. If you woke up this morning and before this podcast, we found out that over the weekend, the Chinese government had decided to make good on an indictment of Donald Trump that they had done in the secret grand jury back in Chinese. And for Chinese reasons, for Chinese crimes, and violations of Chinese law, the Chinese decided to come in with a naval and an aerial bombardment of Washington, D.C. They blew up certain strategic targets and anti-air defenses. They ran their helicopters, which are copies of our Black Hawks, and dropped a Tier 1 special asset team to go do an extraordinary rendition of the President of the United States and the First Lady, Melania Trump, and took them in helicopters, blindfolded them, sat them next to armed Chinese guards, flew them back to Chinese, landed at a Chinese airfield, and then marched them out, drove them around, and said, we are now taking over, and we're going to be able to make sure that this narco-terrorist bad guy that we have indicted on our laws for owning a gun and for having, involvement in things that we didn't like is now going to stand trial in our most favorable court to the government. And Americans would be like, well, that's fine. We're totally okay with that simply because, he violated Chinese laws and Chinese laws have to hold across the world. It's a little rough for me to buy that the United States has any business going in to foreign nations. It doesn't mean we like them. But if you're going to say that because somebody is a bad guy, we got to go get them, our world is replete with bad guys. There are many people. Kim Jong-un is one of them. We're not going to go grab the guy from North Korea, are we? No. People claim Vladimir Putin is an awful person. We're not going to go and do a rendition on Vladimir Putin, even if he violates policies or American laws. Xi Jinping is not going to get arrested by an American special ops team and the DEA, even though they've been moving fentanyl into this country for, the last decade. So none of these things are going to play out that way. And so I just want you to know that I think that going into a foreign nation, whether or not it's like a great idea or whether or not it's good for American business or oil, I do think that's an act of war, even if they don't have the ability to wage war against us. And I also think more importantly, and this is the biggest part for me, because the war part actually is like tertiary. The biggest part is Donald Trump said otherwise, campaigned on otherwise, promised me, as far as I can understand it, I'm going to present evidence. He promised otherwise. So that becomes problematic for us. So now we have to readjust what we believe he meant at that time and what it means today based on these policies, simply because we're desperate to try to justify something that doesn't make sense. And more importantly, what we haven't seen is the release of things that people thought they were going to get, like the Epstein files. And maybe more importantly than that, I thought we were going to get corrupt government officials in the United States. And instead what we got is the one guy that they've arrested under this administration that was in the deep state gangster list, John Bolton, is actually on CNN commenting about what he thought about this operation. So it's hard to mark that a win. All right. I'm going to try to be fair on this because I think it's disappointing because I think it's dumb. I think it's dumb and I think it's wrong. And you guys are open to being wrong, rather disagreeing with me, which is the way that this will probably work for some of you. So here we go. Let's talk about survival. It turns out in January, I am often quite focused on this sort of a thing. Why? Because it gets cold. And in Texas, it gets cold and then it gets hot and doesn't make any sense. We could have a freezing, ridiculous snap here where we break out all the power. And if you guys want to make sure that you are insulating yourself against that, or God knows, just a bunch of people being upset in the future in the next 2 years, you want to start getting prepared now for, meltdowns of any kind. consider checking out my friends over at mypatriotsupply.com/KYLE, mypatriotsupply.com/Kyle, link in the show description. We're a few weeks into winter. It's not actually getting cold here, which is weird, which makes me think it's either going to get really bad or we're just done with winter in Texas for a while. If the power goes out, what happens? If it drops down to 30, what do you do? If it drops down to below zero, I've got a friend who was in the negative 30 degree range up in northern Montana. It is getting cold in some places. What do you do? Most people don't have a solution to that. You guys can check out the Vesta off-grid heater from My Patriot Supply. It's a great idea because it doesn't use electricity. It doesn't use propane, so you can use it inside, and it runs on canned heat. We've got a bunch of that stored up in one of our shelves, even though it doesn't really get that bad. I've just got little people and a bunch of women that live in my house that do not like it to get cold. You can stash this in your closet. You know you keep warm no matter what. It doubles as a cook stove, which is pretty cool, so you can cook your emergency food. And what's better than that, you can get it in the winter survival kit right now from My Patriot Supply. The offer won't last long. Check it out. You see it on the screen. Go and check them out at mypatriotsupply.com/KYLE, mypatriotsupply.com/Kyle. Big fan of all the stuff that I've gotten from them so far. This entire podcast is actually powered on their backup generator. You guys may or may not know that, but that's what this is all plugged into. Even if we lost power here, we would have that. So check out my friends over there, and let's get into today's program, which may be upsetting to some of you. That's okay. Okay. Have we set it up? Here's where I think we're going to start with this argument. Domestic policy, if you're America first, and if you want to make this country great again, it has to start domestically. You have to walk and chew gum. There's always going to be things happening in the world, but if you're not handling the stuff in your own house, then you're in a bad spot. And this is the argument being made by the same woman that I played the other day on Newsmax. Is that what it's called? No, News Nation. I don't know what News Nation is. So let's play this real quick. This is the argument. This hits home and resonates with me, and then I'm going to kind of continue on where I think our problems are.
The president has to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So he has to be able to work on domestic issues and foreign policy. The problem we have here is he's not doing either one very well. And when people can't afford groceries and gas and their electric bills, they don't care what's going on in Ukraine. They don't care what's going on in Venezuela. They don't care what's going on in Iran. They can't pay their own bills. So you got to get our own house in order before you start doing other things. I firmly agree with you that there are definite positives to taking care of some of these things, but Trump needs to be able to explain better what he's doing on the domestic front while he's doing.
That's it. It's really simple. Do you guys want it in a less reverent way? This guy named Jesse, who does a lot of TikToks. He's great. He's over on Twitter as well, or on X. And he and I have been kind of texting back and forth or DMing over there. And a lot of the same things we see in the same problems, which is that it's not that this is an awful thing in and of itself if it was standalone. It's awful in the context of we've made some promises to you. And it sounds like you kind of missed the message. So here's an irreverent way of saying, this is the expectation and it wasn't met. And I think that actually hits home for me as well. And then I'm going to give you sort of a statesman version of the same thing.
So clearly, Trump did not understand the assignment. You remember like a year ago, Trump's like, oh, I'm going to arrest all the corrupt politicians. And we were all like, fuck yeah, dude. And then we've been waiting like a whole year. We wake up this morning and Trump's like, I arrested a fucking corrupt politician. We were like, dude, that's not the guy. You flew all the way to a foreign country. You could have just went across the street, dude. Like, what are you doing? He's not even on. Like, there's 1,000 other motherfuckers from America you could have arrested. And we would be like the people in Venezuela. Great for the people in Venezuela. You see them all in the streets cheering? Like, they're fucking happy as fuck. That's how we would all be. If you would go across the street and arrest the corrupt politicians from the government that are defrauding us and sending all of our money to foreign countries and giving it to Somali pirates and a bunch of fucking worthless bastards on fucking welfare. Jesus.
Before it gets too blasphemous, this is the question. Doesn't that make sense? Shouldn't we handle things in our own house? Shouldn't we go and try to clean up the fraud and the abuse? And let's call it the burden that is on the American taxpayer. Can we not liberate just regular people? I know that what Jesse is saying resonates with normal people because I go out and talk to regular people all the time. I am myself a regular person. I may do a podcast from a rented room in a house, but I'm doing kind of the same thing that everybody else is. I'm playing with my kids. I'm going to the grocery store. I got to drive down and get an oil change because I don't have room in my garage to do that sort of thing. This is not an obnoxious position. And I know it's normal because when I go talk to people sitting at the park and we're just like watching our kids run and our 2-year-olds are going down the slide together, the first thing they say is like, what the hell are we doing here? And if you bring up the Somali pirates, you go like, yes. Why did we bring Somali pirates? Well, it turns out we went out there and tried to do something, not this exact type of move, but we went in there and did surgical strikes and we're trying to do things in Somalia in the 90s. And it's been a failed state for 30 years. There are failed states all over the place and we continue to take people in from those places. So it ends up adding a burden to us. What's on the screen here? A bacon cheeseburger. This is my cute way, and I'll just call it cute in air quotes. I'm calling it bacon cheeseburger nationalism because regular people eat a bacon cheeseburger. If you gave them the option of bacon, no bacon, and there was no upgrade charge, yeah, we're all getting bacon on that cheeseburger. Why are we doing this? Because this is just basic American stuff. It's not wild. It's essentially Christian nationalism, isn't it? Isn't that what we're talking about? My wife's like, you're just being funny and kind of making it. But here's the problem. Christian nationalism turns off people who are not Christian. There are many people that basically operate and live and function as Christians in America. And many of you are out there saying, well, I'm not a Christian, but your values are in fact the same as mine. That you actually do live a bacon cheeseburger nationalist position, which is just kind of a food-based version of Christian nationalism. If we share the same values, if we eat the same foods, if we have the same culture, if we use the same language, if we think the same things are important, like making sure our family is good to go and that we don't have to worry about all kinds of, dangers, and that we're not out there spending tens of billions of dollars on people that we shouldn't even bring in here in the first place, I'm going to show you the people that are upset about this idea of what we've done in Venezuela, and then I'm going to show you the people that are psyched about it, and that should turn your stomach. Tom Massey thinks there's a problem. Not because of Venezuela per se, but because of our Constitution, which we get further from every single day. At the end of the day, that's the argument that hits home most for me. I don't care if Congress ceded powers. The point is that when the Constitution was created, when this country was framed and founded, there was an idea. And the idea is that you would let the people be able to have a say on things, including the most important thing, like putting our blood and our treasure and our personnel somewhere else. That hits very home to me. There's a reason why the ability to declare war rests in the Article 1 powers of the legislature and not hanging out in the executive. And we've done really bad work. And just because they've done it under all the other regimes and since the 1970s doesn't make it righteous. It just means that we are so far off kilter. If you're going to make America great again, I would hope that it also, and maybe that's just me reading into it, I kind of thought it meant make America more constitutional again. I don't need retribution. What I want is restoration. And so that's what I would like. This is what I would appreciate in America. A recentering on the founding documents, which, by the way, are absolutely brilliant. Read them and discuss them. How about this one? This is an absolutely critical thing that is being left behind. And we're going to quote James Madison in just a moment again. So let's do this one, which we covered a couple of weeks ago. Charity is no part of the legislative duty of the American government. A man who was like the architect of putting together the Constitution said these things. We're not supposed to legislate charity. And that would solve our problem with why in the hell is the American government involved in daycare or feeding programs or school lunches or whatever the heck is going on. There's all kinds of opportunities that are rife with fraud. Why? Because a distant government in Washington, D.C. that is furthest away from the implementation of that policy is writing blank checks or massive checks, which might as well be blank. And they can increase ad nauseum. If you guys want to make sure that you liberate other countries, can we liberate the American people from the crushing tax burden that we're paying for? I had one of the Trump administration officials from Trump 1. He was like, Seraphin, I thought you were a reformer. I'm so disappointed in you. It's like, what are you talking about? I'm an abolitionist for 90+% of this government. I do not understand why our government is in the business of doing the government stuff that it does. So I want none of it. That's what I would like. Is that legitimately reasonable? No, it's probably not going to happen, but it's what we should expect. That's what restoration would look like. And by the way, I'm just going to take Donald Trump at his word. He said he wanted to fund our government with tariffs only. The only way that happens is 90% of the things we spend money on goes away. So that's what they should be working towards. Here's Tom Massey. Take it or leave it. I think that this is a sane statement about what's important. You guys don't have to like it. I just want you to evaluate what he's saying and try to kick out whatever your feelings are about the man. How about we look at the message and not the messenger?
Mr. Speaker, James Madison warned us that in no part of the Constitution is more wisdom to be found than in the clause which confides the question of war and peace to the legislature and not the executive. Madison called it the crown jewel of Congress. The framers understood a simple truth. To the extent that war-making power devolves to one person, liberty dissolves. If the president believes military action against Venezuela is justified and needed, he should make the case and Congress should vote before American lives and treasure are spent on regime change in South America. Let's be honest about likely outcomes. Do we truly believe that Nicolas Maduro will be replaced by a modern-day George Washington? How did that work out in Cuba, Libya, Iraq, or Syria? Previous presidents told us to go to war over WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, that did not exist. Now it's the same playbook, except we're told that drugs are the WMDs. If it were about drugs, we'd bomb Mexico or China or Colombia, and the president would not have pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez. This is about oil and regime change. And when it comes to regime change, we've already been down this road with Venezuela with nothing to show for it. In 2019, we recognized Juan Guaido. We seized their embassy here in D.C. We were told that regime change was imminent. Years later, Maduro remains in power. Today, we're told to place our hopes in other exiled figures. Edmundo Gonzalez and Maria Corina Machado. I wish them well, I do. But Congress should not express moral sympathy in the form of a blank check for military escalation and American lives. And let's take a moment to acknowledge the contradiction at the heart of this policy. This administration tells us that the Maduro regime is made up of narco-terrorists, and by escalating toward war, we would predictably create countless refugees. At the same time, this administration has moved to end temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans and deports them back to the very regime it condemns. So which is it? Are we prepared to receive swarms of the 25 million Venezuelans who will likely become refugees and billions in American treasure that will be used to destroy and inevitably rebuild that nation? Do we want a miniature Afghanistan in the Western Hemisphere? If that cost is acceptable to this Congress, then we should vote on it as a voice of the people and in accordance with our Constitution. And yet today, here we aren't even voting on whether to declare war or authorize the use of military force. All we're voting on is a war powers resolution that strengthens the fabric of our republic by reasserting the plain and simple language in the Constitution that Congress must decide questions of war. I urge support for this resolution, and I yield back.
I don't think that's really that outlandish. It's not an outlandish thing to say that there are certain powers that are put in the Constitution, that the purpose of these powers is so that the people get to elect somebody in, not one singular person who executes the policy, but a broad-scale debate should happen, and then you decide whether or not you're going to go forward. And they're not even talking about doing a declaration of war, which, by the way, we are talking about an act of war. And again, go back to my Chinese analogy. Go back to any other country that is going to project force or power into another country. What would we call that? I don't know what else to call it. So let's go to Donald Trump in his own words. This is on the most recent campaign trail. This has been something that Donald Trump has made claims about since he has been in politics. But let's just take him at his most recent words. Did he say, we're going to go and do this kind of stuff? Is this the kind of thing that he was campaigning on? Which is why I want you to know, I just evaluate the guy on his own words. Top 10 most important things to MAGA during the 2023-2024 run-up to the November election year before last. Was any of it about deposing Maduro? Because I'm pretty confident he said the opposite. Start with 2024.
Said, oh, he's going to start a war because they said I had that personality to start a war. They remember that? Oh, we can't vote for him. He's going to start a war. No, I used my personality that we didn't have to have wars. I was the first president in decades who started no new wars. Who started no new wars and no new wars. No new wars. We don't need the wars, foreign lands, countries you've never heard of, countries that don't even want us there. I was the first president in decades who started No new wars. I was the first president in decades who started no new wars. We will expel the warmongers from our government. You know, we never got into a war with me. I have a great record. We had peace. We had prosperity. We had no wars. We had no wars. That started no wars. We didn't have a war. We will expel the warmongers from our government. We will expel the warmongers from our government. We will expel the warmongers from our government. And we had no wars. When you see all the people that died in these horrible wars in the Middle East and everything else, countries didn't want us. Look at Trump. Just look at this guy. He's going to go to war. He's going to take us. No. Look at me. I'm the one that kept us out of war. You know, I'm the only president that didn't start a war. I didn't start a war.
This president, no wars.
Started no wars. You're going to end up in a war. Or war or no war. They like a war. They love wars. You know, they love killing people. It's so wonderful. You know, I'm the only president in many, many decades that didn't start a war. They're the party of endless wars. I was the first.
All right, let's break away from that because it's repetitive. You guys get it? There's like 5, 6, 8 minutes of him just saying this over and over again. It's a good compilation. Obviously, this is put out by people on the left that are trying to make a point. So let's consider, who is the company that Donald Trump is keeping? Tom Massey is PNG'd from the MAGA movement, from the America First people. He's attacked. He's got a primary coming up. You don't have to feel one way or another about it. Let's just take that as something that is happening, that is evidence Donald Trump has said nasty things about it, okay? Who loves war? Who, if you were going to just close your eyes, picture a member of Congress, either the House or the Senate, and think, who is the person that is walking around that is basically a pulsing, throbbing war boner in the human form of a old white guy with doughy face and kind of a gross tongue? I picture Lindsey Graham. Some of you maybe too. Lindsey Graham, even our chat got it. I love it. I love it when you guys are on the same page as me, okay? The chat knows. Lindsey Graham. Forget golfing with Lindsey Graham. What if we could bring Lindsey Graham onto Air Force One so he can have close proximity and hang out with the president as he sits right now? And what if we could tell you about the other new wars that we would love to talk about? Because wouldn't it be fun if it wasn't just an act of war and a rendition, extraordinary rendition, grabbing a narco-terrorist? And let's give them the DEA the due and say, this is just one dude who needed to be grabbed because he was super bad and he was really involved in fentanyl and election fraud, even though we just arrested him for cocaine and for machine guns. And we'll get into that in a second. Let's just say that. You think that there are not people out there that are going, ooh, I like where this is going. Here's what that guy says.
Could have done it. And as to this commander-in-chief, he did something people talked about doing. You just wait for Cuba. Cuba is a communist dictatorship that's killed priests and nuns. They've preyed on their own people. Their days are numbered. We're going to wake up one day, I hope in 26, in our backyard, we're going to have allies in these countries doing business with America, not narco-terrorist dictators killing Americans. This is a big frigging day. And everybody in the world is thinking differently than they were just a few days ago because of what you did.
I mean, maybe they are. Maybe they're looking at this picture and they're like, oh, that could be me. The United States government might come to me and maybe I should throw out all the things that I thought he had said because I'm pretty confident that Donald Trump said he didn't want to get involved in a bunch of other conflicts. That gives me a lot of pause. The people that are in close proximity to you are the ones that you hear last. Somebody has said that essentially Donald Trump basically takes the last advice he hears before he makes a decision. If Lindsey Graham is in that room, that's not a good thing for me. At least the way that I look at it. I'm also struck by, for some reason, all the pictures that we see that came out of this operation, the DEA released, and some of the, I don't know, the Army security forces that brought the guy, that brought Maduro back to the United States. They all look like they were taken out of the 90s, because this looks exactly like a grab of Saddam Hussein or like an attempt to go after him or like anyone else. What I just heard was Lindsey Graham talking about Cuba, which makes me think of things like Urgent Fury and Grenada. And obviously we did a lot of that stuff. I'm going to broadly say that when I previously was talking about how the United States that I grew up in would invade the United States I live in, that was only because the United States actually thought we were the good guy on the world stage. That was broadly considered to be the case. And if anyone kind of like messed around, we went out and did it. It doesn't mean it was good. It just meant that we could just kind of like push our way around. Wasn't real crazy about it. Here's my concern. Trump has basically set himself up that his measure of success and the way that people should look at him is the opposite. You heard the 2023, the 2024, the no new wars, the warmongers, we're going to get him out of government. And he's out there campaigning for Lindsey Graham. So that's tough. That's tough to swallow for me. This was him in 2019. This is during the first term. He hasn't really changed, and neither have people in his administration. So something obviously has, and I don't know what it is.
We are finally putting America first. Our policy of never-ending war, regime change, and nation building is being replaced by the clear-eyed pursuit of American interests.
Okay, that was 2019 Trump. Like, that sounds pretty good. I think that's kind of what we were on board with. Can we focus on problems? Can you solve domestic issues? You can handle other stuff as well, but it doesn't sound like we've got this under control here. Our taxes are still wild. We're still funding all kinds of fraud. And what do we get out of it? Stern letters and maybe a little bit of shutdown of one thing, not the discussion of the actual symptom, which is why in the hell is our government involved in this in the first place? Why? And I don't know the answer. That's an open question. Why is the federal government involved in healthcare? Why does anyone think that's even something we should be doing? Why is the federal government involved in childcare? Where is that? And why would you think that the federal government, which most people would agree on either side of the aisle, is corrupt and inefficient? Well, why do you want to outsource things that touch your person? Literally touch your person in the case of healthcare. Why would you want the most distant thing handling it? And I don't know what the answer to that is. Here's Tulsi Gabbard when she was running for president in 2019. And someone that I was a little bit skeptical of joining the Trump administration has turned out to be probably like more aligned with what I thought we were going to be doing in trying to de-weaponize stuff over at ODNI and the intelligence agencies, which, by the way, are in full force resistance. The people that want business as usual continue to do it. And what we haven't seen is a lot of talk from Tulsi Gabbard. She's probably been a little frustrated by that, huh? This is 2019, Tulsi Gabbard, Democrat, running for the nomination for the Democratic Party so she could run for president. And she's actually fairly consistent between then and 2025. Kind of like Donald Trump was in 2019 and 2023 and 2024.
Here now exclusively, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, a combat veteran and 2020 Democratic presidential candidate. What's your reaction to that? You heard Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president there.
What we are hearing is an increased saber-rattling intention saying the United States needs to send in the U.S. military now to wage yet another wasteful, counterproductive regime change war. And once again, it's being done under the guise of humanitarianism. When we look throughout history, every time the United States goes into another country and topples a dictator or topples a government, the outcome has been disastrous for the people in these countries. That's why we should use our leadership in the world to try to broker a diplomatic solution, working with countries like Russia that have great influence over Venezuela so that there is a peaceful outcome. Because I can tell you as a soldier, Martha, I've seen firsthand the high cost of war, and pushing for this civil war, pushing for the use of military force will only end up with more suffering and death and disaster for the Venezuelan people. What to speak of increasing these tensions that threaten our own national security. Anytime we're in this situation where you have tensions being ratcheted up and this conflict being pushed closer and closer between nuclear armed countries like the United States and countries like Russia and China, this is something that poses an existential threat to the American people.
Okay, I agree. And it turns out we thought war was kind of a big deal when the Constitution was written up. Here it is. This is the Constitution. You guys can find this in the National Archives at archive.gov. It's in the founding documents section. And I just went and did a quick Google search, or not a Google search, but rather a document search. And I wanted to find, hey, did they mention the word war very often? And the answer is no. It's like 4 times in there. It's really not that frequent. And I've got Delaware, which is not war. I've got this is Article 1, Section 8, the power to declare war. It rests in the legislature. So this is really important. And it also talks about letter of marque and reprisal and some other things going on, supporting armies and appropriations and the money and so on. So we understand how we're going to fund it. It also talks about whether or not this is Article 1, Section 10. It says that no state shall, without the consent of Congress, keep ships of war, engage in war. So that means that Congress must consent to do this kind of stuff. And again, I'm just talking about the constitutionality of it. This is where I would like to see our country return. That would be best. And then the last time you're going to see it is in Article 3. This is under the judiciary clauses, and it's Section 3 talking about that treason specifically is a wartime crime. And that's it, guys. It's really straightforward. The discussion of war was known. I understand that they are now looking to go and say whether or not they're going to support it, but we didn't give the power to levy war. And I don't like the idea that there's temporary military actions. I asked somebody, when was the last time we had something really successful happen in this space? People were like, well, we did a pretty good job in Japan, and we did a pretty good job in Germany, and we saved Western Europe. It's like, okay, what else? And they're like, what about South Korea? Because it could just be Korea all at once. It's like, all right, well, then what about Vietnam? What about all the weird little things we've done in Africa? And how come there's so many dysfunctions when we start putting things in? I understand the oil piece of it. I understand the BRICS piece of it and the petrodollar. And maybe we'll talk about that. That's not really my world. But the fact is that we're what? We're back in like a CIA asset right now? Maybe, but maybe not. Tulsi has been consistent about this, shockingly enough. From 2019 Democratic candidate to 2025 cabinet member for Donald Trump, we are talking about someone that basically continues to say regime change is not a great idea. And then we've got our president saying exactly the opposite. So I'm going to get to that on the other side of this little commercial break here. We're going to talk about our friends over at Patriot Protect. Scams, frauds, they continue on. They don't stop. It turns out just because it's a new year, it's not going away. And so I would recommend you guys consider fixing your own sort of house. Scammers and criminals raise the stakes in 2025. They're using things like AI. This is an arms race against what you can do. In 2026, the choice is yours, either to act or to stay exposed. The turning point was more threats to privacy, more security powers become more capable, but you're also dealing with a more complex AI-based cloning voices, making videos. This is a reason why I don't put any pictures of my children on the internet. I don't want whatever they can create out of it, deep fakes and so on. You have people that do things like virtual kidnapping, and they know what you have because they've seen your information, which is out there publicly available. If you want to stay away from getting hit with scams, you don't want to get fake phone calls from people's voices that you love and know, one way you can do is keeping your name and your address and your phone number and your family members, your age, your online behavior, and so on, all hidden from the public by getting rid of it. It has to be scanned, found regularly, and then eliminated. This is one of the things that the Search and Protect protocol does for Patriot Protect. It's patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Using my name at checkout will save you 15% on an annual subscription. It's less than $100 a year. I think it's less than $80 a year. I have to double check. They've got a couple different packages, but I just renewed ours. My buddy, another suspendable, just did the same thing. My parents use it. My wife uses it. It's just a thing. It's a fire and forget solution. Start it in January. Start the new year off correct by making sure that you're not vulnerable in ways you don't need to, and then you don't have to worry about stuff like that. There are still other scams out there, but this is an inexpensive way that you can start eliminating some of your exposure online, which is kind of like ongoing and never stops. Patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Give yourself 24/7 security team running after, trying to keep this stuff away from these scumbags and scammers who just never stop. They just do not. They will continue. And, so you just set up a little annual subscription in January. It's easy to keep your books straight on that. All right, let's do Tulsi Gabbard in, how about 2025 Tulsi Gabbard? That seems reasonable. Is she different? I don't think she is.
The old Washington way of thinking is something we hope is in the rearview mirror and something that has held us back for too long. For decades, our foreign policy has been trapped in a counterproductive and endless cycle of regime change or nation building. It was a one-size-fits-all approach of toppling regimes, trying to impose our system of governance on others, intervene in conflicts that were barely understood, and walk away with more enemies than allies. The results? Trillions spent, countless lives lost, and in many cases, a creation of greater security threats. The rise of Islamist terrorist groups like ISIS. President Trump was elected by the American people to put an end to this. And from day one, he has showed a very different way to conduct foreign policy.
Yeah, a different way of foreign policy is not extraordinary renditions sending people in to grab heads of state. Whether or not you think they're legitimate or not is kind of irrelevant. We've made a bunch of messes all over the world, so our past performance tells us what may be in store for us. We could have tons of people coming into this country because we've created a mess. And what I keep seeing is people out there cheerleading this stuff with never a single sort of retroactive moment where they just go, hey, is this actually consistent with what we were promised? Is this actually consistent with what the mission was? Again, the irreverent way that we started the show out, Jesse on TikTok saying it. I got to figure out what Jesse's last name is. Maybe he doesn't list that, but it's really straightforward. It's like, we had an opportunity to do something. We'd like you to keep doing it. We want more of what Trump promised and less of the distractions. If you're going to chew bubblegum and walk at the same time, the walking part is really critical. You got to stay on your feet. You got to solve domestic issues, period. What we don't need is more of this. This is Grant Stinchfield, Real America's Voice. Apparently, Donald Trump is always right. So have faith in Donald Trump. Since we just studied or celebrated the Epiphany in the Catholic Church, many of you guys just celebrated the gift giving if you're in the Orthodox side. I don't have any faith in any men at all. Like, they're not relevant to what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how my family does. I'm interested in outcomes. There was this guy who used to be a podcaster and maybe very soon a podcaster again, who said, don't fall in love with politicians, fall in love with the outcomes. Well, the outcome is sketchy right now. It's undetermined what this is going to look like, but I don't like where it's going, and I'm going to use their own words because the things they're saying are not great. Just because it was a super cool dude mission to be able to send in people and show a capability doesn't mean that that's what we need to be doing. There's an awful lot of times when we have these capabilities and we don't use them on purpose. Anyway, or you could have faith in the man, because this is it, walking on a beach, looks like he's in Cancun, having a great time, and telling you, how dare you question the supreme ruler of America?
So to those of you who are worried that President Trump is somehow engaged in nation building, I want to point a couple things out. First and foremost, President Trump is always right. Have faith in him. Trust him. He wins every single time. Number two, Venezuela is very different than Iran or Iraq or Afghanistan. Why? Muslim nation versus Christian nation. A nation, Venezuela, that was free. The people of Venezuela embrace freedom. They did have great wealth that was stolen from them. Iraq, Afghanistan, Muslim nation. They're used to living under a dictator. It takes exceptional people to embrace freedom. Venezuela can handle it. The reality was Iraq and other Muslim nations could not handle that freedom. Now to the issue of President Trump's just going in there to take the oil. May I remind everybody, the oil was ours. It was stolen from us. This isn't like going into Iraq to drill for oil and have America prosper. This is about returning what was once ours to its rightful owner. And President Trump made it clear that he's...
All right, got it. So it was our oil to begin with, even though it was in Venezuela. There wasn't totally agreements that happened in the late 1990s and then in the early 2000s that basically Venezuela was able to make their own laws in their own country. Whether or not we like them or not is irrelevant. And this has nothing to do with what would happen in a Muslim nation. We would never make the same argument to do what we just did in Venezuela that we would do to, like, say, I don't know, go into Iraq, right? Because they're totally different. That's what Grant said. And yet, then you got our friends over on the political left, who sometimes can do it in a funny way, pointing out that they use the same language. I want you to consider this. One of the ongoing treatises of this particular podcast is that when you say that there's a changeover in the guard, when you have a new administration, it's Donald Trump's DOJ, it's Donald Trump's FBI, it's Donald Trump's State Department, it is Biden's State Department, it's Biden's CIA. Take your pick. Here's where the problem comes in. If you actually are someone who believes that there is, in fact, a deep state apparatus, like a long-term, deep bench managerial culture that exists in all these federal agencies that predates every administration and will also survive beyond them, this is what it is. That's what a deep state is. It's not something sexy where people are handing files off in a basement somewhere in the dark with shadows. It's not film noir stuff like the X-Files. A deep state is quite simple. It is that the state believes, the members that work in the administrative state, that they believe that they know better about what they do and that they will last longer than every single administration. So let's go with that. And one of the things I told you that I immediately noticed, we noticed For example, our particular focus here on this podcast of something about Kash Patel using the same words as Jim Comey and Chris Wray. The same words about the same topics. And so you start wondering, well, who's writing those words? This is always the question we ask, right? Who is the they? Like, well, they let this happen, and they did this, and they did this to us, and they released COVID, and they caused this particular thing. Who's the they? Broadly speaking, I think they is really a plurality. It's many people operating in their own interests, in their own governmental agencies that are pushing forward with what they believe are the right answers. And I don't think they're doing it in bad faith. They're not nefarious actors that go home and giggle and do the pinky in the brain thing. We're trying to take over the world. They actually believe that what they're saying is correct. And so when they message it, it comes across honestly. And that's why it doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter who's saying it. Whether you're Marco Rubio or you're someone going back to the Bush administration, we always end up using the same justifications because the people that are writing this stuff, they, the faceless they, the administrative state they, they're feeding the same things. Watch this Daily Show clip. This is justification of Iraq in contrast to the justification for what happened in Venezuela. And then we'll get to the press conference.
I'm not even going to play around anymore. It. Hit me with the works. Iraq, Venezuela, go! We're giving them full opportunity to do it the easy way. And when it doesn't work, we'll do it the hard way.
If we can do things the easy way, that's fine. And if we have to do it the hard way, that's fine too.
Chemical weapons is a threat to the United States.
Fentanyl poses a chemical weapons threat to the United States.
Al-Qaeda terrorists inside Iraq.
Al-Qaeda of our hemisphere.
We can get rid of Saddam. It could really begin to transform the region.
There's an opportunity to transform the entire region.
Bringing freedom and democracy.
Democracy and freedom can serve as a
beacon of hope.
Shock and awe.
Oops. Why is it so easy to be able to string together a clip in just one day of the similarities in the arguments being made? I find that to be troubling. I find that to be frustrating, and I'm a little bit concerned about it. So here's the FAFO. This is the super serious people. And generally speaking, here's the deal. I think as a cabinet secretary, it is in fact your job to lobby to make your cabinet position bigger, your department get better funding, to be able to take your toys out and use them, right? If you found out that we have this capability, but we never use it, then why do we have it? So you got to use it or you lose it. It's hard to justify something. So you want to go out and run your tier one assets. You want to go out and drive the Ferrari to do things like this. You've got to go out and use the capabilities and exercise those authorities. Now, I hope that we would curtail those things and make them smaller. That would be nice. It would be really good, in my opinion, to have less of the government in general. But I understand why people do this. I'm not even mad at Hegseth for what they did, because when you talk about a Department of War, it should be forward-leaning, hyper-aggressive, sharp-toothed, bloody-fanged, violence-dealing, destruction of, capabilities, all empowered in one thing. It's supposed to go over and break things and hurt feelings. It's a nice way of saying just go and destroy stuff. That's what the Department of War ought to do. In the same way that the FBI should be straining at the leash to go out there and get bad guys, to the edge of what the Constitution allows. In the same way federal law enforcement should do that, in the same way that our statecraft should be doing what they need to do. We're also supposed to have a Congress that keeps this stuff in check. That's the reason why. Because you're not going to just have one executive agent who says, I've got this capability, let's go, go, go. You're supposed to have the discussion and a bunch of voices who see different reasons and why, and they have different amounts of time on the planet. And they say, well, I remember this time when it didn't go well and we voted and we were conned that time, but we won't be conned this time, etc. We're supposed to have kind of like some slow moving progress towards being able to do that thing. The cabinet secretary, though, is supposed to go out there and advocate. So I don't even hate that he says FAFO, which is actually cartoonish, when he's out there giving a serious press conference talking about a foreign nation and going in after a machine gun charge and cocaine trafficking, which, by the way, will show the indictment. Zero mention of fentanyl, zero mention of Smartmatic, zero mention of Dominion, zero mention of election machines. If you guys were wondering if this is what it's about, maybe it will be, but that's not what the indictment says. And it's being done where? This is really important, so I want to put the chat up here. Folks in the chat, the indictment against Maduro was got by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York. The Southern District of New York that went after Project Veritas and James O'Keefe, for those of you who care about that. Unjustly, I would suggest to you. Went after Donald Trump and gave people from their office to Alvin Bragg's office in Manhattan to go after Donald Trump. The Southern District of New York is a problem. And this is where this indictment is done. So the exact same people who played this game are still playing this game, because when you want to go and get somebody in a soft district for government, there's 3 soft districts for government in the United States: the District of DC, the Eastern District of Virginia, and the Southern District of New York. Those are the 3 softest districts for the federal government. They win everywhere, by the way, in general. But consider that, because that's problematic, I think. It's not like they clean house. The same people who went after Trump are now the ones that are doing this. I just want you to know who you're cheering for.
Nicolas Maduro had his chance, just like Iran had their chance, until they didn't and until he didn't. He effed around and he found out. President Trump is deadly serious about stopping the flow of gangs and violence to our country. Deadly serious about stopping the flow of drugs and poison to our people. Deadly serious about getting back the oil that was stolen from us. And deadly serious about reestablishing American deterrence and dominance in the Western Hemisphere. This is about the safety, security, freedom, and prosperity of the American people. This is America first. This is peace through strength. And the United States War Department is proud to help deliver it. Welcome to 2026.
Welcome to 2026. This sounds like WWE type stuff. I mean, it was a little bit more subtle. Southern District of New York, that's where that indictment came from. The same place where we were told all the Epstein files were being contained and being held back from the actual person who was supposed to be running the Justice Department, Pam Bondi at DOJ, the Attorney General, right? That's who's going to go and put this guy on trial. All I'm saying is, I want people to just be a little bit more critical in their own thinking. If you're cheering this action on, also consider what you're sort of co-signing with. And of course, there are multiple people inside the Southern District of New York that work there. But the FBI, why people ask why? Why is that? It's because the Washington field office and the New York field office, and I think the Miami field office and maybe Los Angeles, there's like basically 4 offices in the US that have seriously aggressive, what are called extraterritorial squads for either terrorism or for criminal activity. And they kind of divide up the globe where they go to these investigations. And so then they bring them back. So you could charge theoretically in Miami. A lot of stuff that happens in the Southern Hemisphere and in Latin America, it goes through Miami. So I'm not sure why this one was not that. But I know the Caribbean and Central America, generally speaking, falls into Miami's purview. New York apparently has, South America. I don't know why that is. But they did bring it to a place where you should be asking some real questions. I think it's totally fair and reasonable to ask that. And you heard him say, we're doing this. Why? One of the big things I heard on there was oil, which is the same thing that people are talking about. I heard Grant Stinchfield say it's not about oil. Is it not about oil? Is it not?
The countries that negotiate with Venezuela for that illegal oil are already starting to suffer. What do you see as the future of Venezuela's oil industry?
Well, I see that we're going to be very strongly involved in it. That's all. I mean, what can I say? We have the greatest oil companies in the world, the biggest, the greatest, and we're going to be very much involved in it. We can't do something like this, and we're prepared. We were prepared to do a second wave. We were all set, and this was so lethal, this was so powerful that we didn't have to, but we're prepared. We're out there with an armada like nobody's ever seen before, and we're prepared, and frankly, probably thought we were going to have to do it, but we were prepared for a second wave going in.
It's kind of tough when you've had a guy who basically said we weren't going to do any more blood for oil, that said that his entire persona is that he's the president of peace and he's the guy that negotiates peace, not starts trouble. So again, whether or not it ends up being a net good, I just want people to evaluate, is this what you voted for? Are we now going to readjust priorities simply because Donald Trump has decided to do something that nobody expected? Nobody told us we had to go do that. That's hard. That's hard for me to swallow. And I imagine this is where you're going to get the problem. Donald Trump's election in 2024 happened because you got not just the MAGA people, not the people wearing the hat. You got people that looked around and said, got it. Alternatively, we could go with this drunken lady who says word salads and are nonsensical and is pushing socialist garbage and wants to take our children and, cut their body parts off and says all kinds of crazy stuff. And you go, okay, that's really problematic. I don't want that lady. Okay, so I'm going to go the other way. But part of it is the promises that get made on that. We're going to reform government. I would say restore government to where it was. You got a bunch of independents off the couch that are going to not be interested in the midterms. And that's where I think the real problem comes in, because you're only going to get a 2-year presidency. You're going to have a 2-year lame duck under impeachment. So for all of you that want to see Donald Trump be successful, and believe me, I want more of what Donald Trump promised, less of what Donald Trump is doing. Is that fair? That's my position on this stuff. And I certainly I'm not excited about running Venezuela and stepping in and doing so on behalf of oil companies. That isn't giving me cheap gasoline or cheap diesel for my truck is not going to solve the problem. It's not going to make me think that, oh, well, you did all the right things because you did what you could. That's a half measure. The real issue still exists in the multiple different dangerous things that we heard you were going to fix. Part 1, shut down the border. Well done, job well done, credit where it's due. That's the tourniquet. The tourniquet requires surgical intervention. The surgical intervention is get rid of people that don't belong in this country, whether they be Somali pirates or TPS recipients from fill-in-the-blank country, Haiti, Venezuela, I don't care. People who came here illegally, get out of my country. Are we doing that at a level that's going to work? Are we going to get to 20 million in 4 years? Not even close. So that's a problem. That's the thing that's going to build affordability. You want to make housing affordable? Kick 6 million people out that shouldn't be living here. Kick 20 million out and you'll free up 6 million houses where people like me can go and rent or buy, and we now have an opportunity to get it. That's the big problem. And again, and I said this last year and I'm going to say it again, Trump's big issue continues to be this weird 80s thing that he was able to pull off and very little other people can do. He overpromises, underdelivers, and somehow that kind of works for him. But it's not going to work for anybody else, and it's not going to work for the Republican Party. The GOP put out something over the weekend that said, if you can't claim that you're a Republican, like one day, like you'll be sad. No, I'm thrilled that I don't tell anybody I'm a Republican. It's bizarre to me that you would think I would want to identify with a party that basically doesn't do anything serious. That all you guys want to do is be Democrats going the speed limit to screwing up the thing that I've been screwing up my whole life. I've watched it screwed up by you. I've seen the same arguments. Now we're seeing recycled arguments. The same ones they used in Iraq are going to be used in Venezuela. That's not a good look. And all it tells me is the people that continue to work in government are the ones that still maintain power. Everything about Trump 2.0 was supposed to be about dismantlement of deep state. And that's not happening. Objectively, you can tell it's not. All right. If you guys are watching us, make sure you give a like to this video. Even if it irritates you, I hope it does. I hope it sets you thinking one way. Give us a like on Rumble. Give us a like on YouTube. Make a backup plan if you watch us on Rumble, because I kind of expect that we're going to get kicked off there at some point. The free speech platform has been very aggressively stifling what we did for the last year, and I don't imagine it's going to get any better now that Dan Bongino is leaving the government. So subscribe over on YouTube. Subscribe on X if you guys want. You can follow us on Locals until we get kicked off there. And then lastly, if you guys would do me a favor, if you are a listener and you are not listening on Spotify, check out KyleSeraphinShow.com. Very easy to go to. And when you do so, you will find out that Spotify is superior because it gives you video, it'll give you audio, it gives you all the things all at once, and you can swap between them. So maybe you're driving and you can't be distracted by video, but you want to see a graph or a video, something we show as an image. Yeah, check it out. Either way, give us a like, subscribe again on the channels that you're watching, and let's bump up. We're working on 20,000 over on YouTube, which is awesome because we started at about 3,000 last year. So a huge year for the podcast last year, and I expect this year is going to go the same way, especially if they keep giving us all this material, which I don't need it. I would love it if we just had successes and we could cheerlead it, but that's not it. All right, are we going to run Venezuela? Are you guys good with that? I'm not done with this, folks. So here we go. Let's run a country that's not ours, since we're doing such a great job running ours.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave.
Great news. Super excited about that. So we're going to go run Venezuela?
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years.
So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about.
We're all about judicious, except we're going to go into a sovereign land that's not ours. And we're going to go grab their head of state, whether or not we think he's good or not. We're going to take him back to the Southern District of New York, and then he's going to be able to face this. Wow. I mean, that's a hell of a statement. And I guess nobody told him, like, hey, man, maybe downplay that a little bit. You're going to probably get some follow-up questions. Here's the follow-up question. Wait, sir, excuse me, Mr. President. Did you say that we're going to run a foreign nation? And if so, who's going to do that?
Are you saying that Secretary Hegseth and Rubio are going to be running Venezuela? And will you be sending in U.S. military troops to provide?
Team that's working with the people of Venezuela to make sure that we have Venezuela right. Because for us to just leave, who's going to take over? I mean, there is nobody to take over. You have a vice president who's been appointed by Maduro. And right now she's the vice president, and she's, I guess, the president. She was sworn in as president just a little while ago. She had a long conversation with Marco, and she said, we'll do whatever you need. I think she was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice. We're going to have this done right. We're not going to just do this with Maduro, then leave like everybody else, leave and say, let it go to hell. If we just left, it has zero chance of ever coming back. We'll run it properly. We'll run it professionally. We'll have the greatest oil companies in the world go in and invest billions and billions of dollars and take out money, use that money in Venezuela. And the biggest beneficiary are going to be the people of Venezuela. And also, I can't stress this strongly enough, the people that got thrown out of Venezuela that are now in the United States. And frankly, some want to stay and some probably want to go back. Yeah.
Just a little bit of everything. We're just going to be kind of all over the map here. I'm just going to let you know that we're going to have really great oil companies involved. And by the way, we're going to sort of back, as long as she stays on our page, the woman that the Bush administration backed with the National Endowment for Democracy and CIA backing starting in 2002. We're going to go back to the 2002 CIA plan, who's been waiting 23 years to get into a position, who just recently in February of last year dedicated her Nobel Peace Prize over to Donald Trump and fealty that way. So yeah, so we're totally good to go. It has nothing to do with any of the things you said. This is a little bit troubling. Let's see what the deep state has to say about this. Remember the people that were going to get all arrested? Yeah, this guy facing significant federal prosecution also has time for CNN. So there you go. Here's John Bolton. John Bolton, who's the only person, and he's like a Republican as far as I can tell, still. That's who's been held accountable under the deep state cleanup that we're supposed to have.
Maduro has been extracted. But I think what you didn't get from that press conference today is that he may be gone, but the regime is still there. And the notion of how you're going to change that is very, very much up in the air. And what I have to say, the most stunning part about the press conference was probably saying the U.S. was going to run the country. But the second most stunning was the assault on Mrs. Machado, the leader of the Democratic forces, the natural alternative government that Trump just dismissed.
Yeah, Trump said he didn't think she had the respect or support of the country to be able to lead it. They're instead relying on the vice president there. So you support this extraction and capture of Maduro, but you don't support the notion from the president that the United States is somehow going to run Venezuela.
Well, I don't mind doing it temporarily in the sense that I think on any day after scenario, there's got to be a lot of outside help. When we were looking at this in 2018 and 2019, the administration did do a lot of preparation for the day after, and there would have been a need for a lot of economic advice and assistance. But in the Venezuelan opposition, there is a capacity to govern. And why the Trump administration would think that they're going to be any better at negotiating with what's left of the Maduro regime than anybody else has ever been to convince them to give up power is beyond me. What we should be doing, other than getting ready for military force, is working with the opposition to fragment the remainder of the regime.
Great. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton, and John Bolton's mustache making a CNN appearance. And what they're saying is how come you can't just let the, the intel assets that have always been doing this thing handle business? Why can't we just move on along with that? So then the question has to be posed. If you were overthrowing the regime and you only took down some of it, including basically the first lady and the head of state, then how are you going to run the country? And how is Marco Rubio going to be involved in that? So let's ask the Secretary of State. And the question is actually not answered in a way that makes me feel particularly reassured. There's a couple of really bizarre answers as it gets built in here. They kind of left some people on the ground. If we were doing this rendition, is it going to involve further and more protracted work?
But I'm curious because you just described the regime as still in place, essentially. I mean, I'm curious why the Trump administration decided to leave it intact and only arrest Nicolas Maduro and his wife, the person who controls the police, the chief thug, Diaz-Cabello. He's the interior minister. He's been indicted by the United States. He was in that indictment the administration released. He's a narco-terrorist. There's a $25 million price on his head. He's still in place. The defense minister, who has deep ties to Russia, $15 million price on his head. He is still in place. I'm confused. Are they still wanted by the United States? Why didn't you arrest them if you are taking out the narco-terrorist regime?
You're confused? I don't know why that's confusing to you.
They're still in power.
It's very simple. You're not going to go in and wrap up. But you can't go. You're going to go in and suck up 5 people. They're already complaining about this one operation. Imagine the howls we would have from everybody else if we actually had to go and stay there 4 days to capture 4 other people. We got the top priority. The number one person on the list was the guy who claimed to be the president of the country that he was not, and he was arrested along with his wife, who was also indicted. And that was a pretty sophisticated and frankly complicated operation.
It was.
It is not easy to land helicopters in the middle of the largest military base in the country. The guy lived on a military base. Land within 3 minutes, kick down his door, grab him, put him in handcuffs, read him his rights, put him in a helicopter, and leave the country without losing any American or any American assets. That's not an easy mission. And you're asking me, why didn't we do that in 5 other places at the same time? I mean, that's absurd. I do think this is one of the most, daring, complicated, sophisticated missions this country has carried out in a very long time. Tremendous credit to the U.S. military personnel who did it. It was unbelievable, and tremendous success. And today, an indicted drug trafficker who was not the legitimate president of Venezuela, who we don't recognize, the Biden administration didn't recognize, 60-something countries don't recognize, the European Union doesn't recognize, and many countries in Latin America don't recognize. He was a indicted drug trafficker.
Ooh, he got real close there. He was a convicted? He wasn't indicted. He was a person that we have alleged, but in our system, you're actually, you have the presumption of innocence. Unless anybody's think otherwise, because we'll have to cover the Brian Cole stuff tomorrow. I don't want to go too long. But there's supposed to be a presumption of innocence when you talk about things. It's kind of interesting when this regime, when this administration actually fails with the presumption of innocence, because they do that in certain ways. And I can always tell there's more politics involved when they say things like that slip up, that convicted, indicted piece. And it's not just a mishap, because anybody can make a mistake, say the wrong word on accident. It's a mindset thing. So I'm going to get to that Brian Cole stuff. We're going to put that tomorrow. So if you guys are tuning in, you want to hear more about pipe bomber stuff, there's been some new filings. They happened over the weekend. It's worth covering, but I think this is more pressing in so much as I think it's a sort of a bigger story at the moment. And unfortunately, Brian Cole Jr., the alleged pipe bomber, and I'll say alleged pipe bomber because that's how you're supposed to say it, not the way the DOJ said it, by the way. He's going to be detained indefinitely. His defense, at least, is actually mounting a real defense, which is useful to see. Marco Rubio is having a real hard time trying to justify some of this stuff. What they claimed was they did a decapitation strike. That's usually what you would call it. That's where you either kill people or it's a kill capture mission where you're able to bring people in. They did a decapitation of the government, but they didn't get the head. They got like a piece of the head. So that question was actually a legitimately decent question by a person trying to do journalism. Of course, it has to happen on the left right now because the right's not going to do it. The right is involved in knob slobbery like Grant Stinchfield. So unfortunately, this is why I constantly watch left-leaning news sources. It doesn't change my opinion. I think mostly they're wrong. But when you're doing journalism the way it's supposed to be done, you ask hard questions. And then when you get mediocre as hell answers, we should be going, nah, not great. I'm seeing our chat say, well, you captured the king. It's like, yeah, but that's in chess, that ends the game. This is like capture the king, but every player still gets to remain autonomous. The queen still works. The bishop still works. The knights and the rooks still work. You got a problem. Anyway, how are we going to run this country? What legal status does the United States have to run Venezuela, which Donald Trump claimed?
President Trump was pretty clear yesterday. He said the United States is going to run Venezuela. Under what legal authority?
Well, first of all, what's going to happen here is that we have a quarantine on their oil. That means their economy will not be able to move forward until the conditions that are in the national interest of the United States and the interest of the Venezuelan people are met. And
just for a second, I'm going to pause this. We're going to run the country under the authority that we have quarantined their oil. Somebody in our chat just said law of the jungle. Yeah, that's what it is. It's like might equals right. Is that what it is? I mean, that's fine. That's fine if that's what we want to go do. If America wants to be the biggest bully, I'm not opposed to it. I really am not. I think that there's a meathead answer to that. What I'm opposed to is Donald Trump said he was the opposite of that. And he did so in 2019 and 20 and 21 and 22 and 23 and 24. And right at the beginning, and even his cabinet was saying it into November of this last year, 2 months ago, Tulsi Gabbard, head of the Office of the Directorate of National Intelligence, said the same thing. And then you ask the head of state, what legal status does the United States have to run a foreign nation? And his answer is we're going to quarantine their oil. You just listen. Tell me if you hear a real answer.
That's what we intend to do. So that leverage remains. That leverage is ongoing. And we expect that it's going to lead to results here. We're hopeful that it does. Positive results for the people of Venezuela, but ultimately, most importantly for us, in the national interest of the United States. We will no longer have, hopefully, as we move forward here, we'll set the conditions so that we no longer have in our hemisphere a Venezuela that's the crossroads for many of our adversaries around the world, including Iran and Hezbollah, is no longer sending us drug gangs, is no longer sending us drug boats, is no longer a narco-trafficking paradise for all those drugs coming out of Colombia to going through the Caribbean and towards the United States. And obviously, we want a better future for the people of Venezuela. We want them to have an oil industry where the wealth goes to the people, not to a handful of corrupt individuals and stolen by pirates all over the world. That's what we're working towards, and we intend to use the leverage we have to help achieve that.
Let me ask the
I'm just very concerned that he said that we're going to stop piracy after I just saw the FBI, the DEA, and U.S. military assets and Coast Guard went and grabbed a couple of oil tankers in what looked like kind of like a nationally sponsored piracy. Again, you're not going to hear me cry about them. I'm just pointing out to you that I think there's some serious inconsistencies if you're going to claim this thing, and it doesn't make any sense because the words you're using they're not logical. They don't follow. What legal authority are you going to use? Well, we're going to do an oil blockade and a quarantine, and by the way, we're going to stop pirates, even though we're going to pirate their ships and we're going to take some oil tankers because we said so. Weird. I mean, that would be the same justification I imagine the Somalis did when it came to fraud in Minnesota. It's like, why did you defraud all the American people? Oh, because nobody stopped us, because we were able to, and then we got all this money, and so then we just took the money. And we paid off some more politicians because they wanted us to, same as the United States, we're going to get some oil companies are going to be on board. By the way, significant private equity interests in a lot of these oil companies, 20, 30% ownership, BlackRock's and the like. Yikes. And what about the American people? What about the people in this picture that you're seeing here? The MAGA hat, the sea of people that supported Donald Trump, that just wanted their country back, that just wanted not foreign wars, not scammy scumbags taking all of our resources and smaller government and no government kicking down their doors. We're just going to cheer because we're kicking down somebody else's doors instead for a little while until they lose it at the midterms. It doesn't seem like a winner to me. I don't get it. And is there any consistency in this administration? Can we look at it and be like, well, this is the policy. This is the way they do it. They only go, if you're a narco trafficker, then you got to pay. And the answer is no. And the mainstream is going to pick up on it right away because it's super easy to do. If you do things that are ideologically inconsistent, then people are going to look at it and just go, so what's the difference between these two people? Should we be talking about that? Here you go. Here's just a simple question. Can you articulate why you're pardoning one narco trafficker, but you're not pardoning the other, and you actually are going to go do an extraordinary rendition in their own country?
As you know, the Congressional Gang of Eight has a history of not leaking. But you mentioned the indictment of Mr. Maduro, and of course it does detail his drug running operations. In the same jurisdiction, the former president of Honduras was actually convicted on similar charges, yet the president pardoned him. Here's what the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Mark Warner, had to say about that. He said, you cannot credibly argue that drug trafficking charges demand invasion in one case while issuing a pardon in another. What's your response?
Well, the president has the pardon authority. He's the one that reviewed the file with the folks at the White House to make these pardon decisions, and I refer questions to them on it because I'm not involved in the pardon process. So I can't comment on that because I wasn't involved in that process. But the president outlined yesterday that he felt that in that particular case there was unfairness, and that there was unfairness in the way that individual was treated. And he also pointed to the fact that the party that's now won the elections in Honduras had asked for this. And so I would point to those comments as a rationale for it. In the case of Maduro, look, it's very...
I'm going to break away from that. Well, let's just go to Donald Trump's take on that. Who gets pardoned? Who doesn't get pardoned? Marco Rubio's answer is, I don't do pardons. That's kind of the Mike Johnson move, isn't it? Is like, hey, what do you know about this thing? He's like, well, I haven't read all that. What about the post? Well, I haven't seen the post. Okay, fine. Let's go to the man. Let's go to what Donald Trump said about it. Very simple.
Yeah.
Mr. President, can you explain? You said that Maduro is responsible for drug trafficking. You recently pardoned the former president of Honduras, who was convicted on many drug trafficking. Can you explain how these two situations are different? And would you ever pardon Maduro?
I endorsed, as you know, the winning president, the man who won in Honduras. I endorsed the man who won in Chile. I endorsed the man who won in Argentina, and we are doing very well with that whole group. What the man that I pardoned was, if you could equate it to us, he was treated like the Biden administration treated a man named Trump. That didn't work out too well for them. What? This was a man who was persecuted very unfairly. He was the head of the country. He was persecuted very unfairly, and there are a number of them. And we felt that it was a very unfair situation that happened to him. He's also a party member of the man who won. So obviously the people liked what I did. And one of the reasons that was done is because of the fact that the party in power felt very strongly that that man was treated very badly. I studied it very quickly, and then I studied it in great detail. I went to a lot of the people standing behind me, and they felt that that man was persecuted and treated very badly. That's why I gave him a pardon.
Yeah, perfectly said. No big deal. Yep. So that's why we went and got the president in Venezuela, and we took him to New York, and we just marched him through the DEA headquarters just like that. We just grabbed a dude because that was fair, and the other thing was not fair, and so we're just going to delineate that, and we're just going to arbitrarily take people to Southern District of New York. Legit indictment, actual conviction, court of law in the United States, but we didn't really like it, so we just make it up. And then, as you guys are pointing out in the chat again, we can go grab a foreign head of state, but we can't get Tina Peters out of prison in Colorado, which Trump issued a pardon for that? Even if it's a state charge? Like, if you're just going to do stuff, can you just do stuff? Can you worry about Americans first? Would that be okay? The whole idea of America first to me, and call me crazy, but I actually believe this is real. If I told you that the first thing that was going to be the problem is that we had an open door policy and we let people come in and they trashed my house. So now that I'm in charge and I've been away, but now that I'm back, I'm going to get my house in order. And step number one is I'm installing a deadbolt and a door lock. That's your border security. We are no longer going to let anybody come in and do flop house party tactics. I'm using my dad's words now. I'm sure of it. You can't use my house as a flop house. You got to come in, you got to knock on the door, and we need to accept you in the door before you come in. Okay. I still got a bunch of people that are flopping in there, though. There's a bunch of floppers still in the flop house. But what I want to go do now is I want to go and solve some problems at my next door and my 3 doors down neighbor's house. That's where I'm going to go next. Don't worry about the people that are flopped in my house. Don't worry about the fact that it's completely trashed, that there's poop on the walls, that the drywall's rotted out, that we've got a plumbing problem. The basement is about to flood. Don't worry about any of that. And don't worry about the fact that some of the people that live in my house, my family, is actually stuck on the top floor. And they're just screwed. They're paying for everything. They're paying all the bills. They can't get out. They're unsafe. I've locked the front door. So now I'm going to go down the street and solve some new problems. I'm going to go grab, people that I think are a problem. And that's what I'm going to close with, is that if that's what we're doing, you're going to see some real fall off in support. Not from the MAGA base. I'm sure there's plenty of people that will still, as my buddy Steve Friend says, will crawl over broken glass to vote for Donald Trump or the things that Donald Trump wants. That's true. And I've had some of them reach out to me, and that's fine. I'm talking to the people that are in the independents that make this work or make it not work. You don't have a 51% majority in anywhere in this country. We're broken as a country. Again, I would like to restore it. If we want to talk seriously, how about we talk about repealing the 17th Amendment? Forget the income tax for a minute. How about we just fix the actual structure of government so that our Senate works the way it's meant to, and it's not democratized? Nobody is talking about the serious things that need to be done, and those things predate all of us. If you were real serious, you'd have people aggressively campaigning. Republicans who are conservatives, who want the Senate to function, would say, you can no longer do that. By the way, they would take the Senate if they could get people on board with it. It is meant to be the upper house, and it is not. So you don't see that. So when you start talking to people that are sort of like generally persuadable, and I am generally persuadable. I voted for Donald Trump in November of 24. It was transactional for me, but I wanted something real specific. I wanted my friend not to go to prison, and I hope we would de-weaponize government, and I thought we were on the path to restoration. I believe the words America First meant something, like let's solve our problems here. Sounds like an awesome idea. And instead, I'm watching what looks like we're going to see Steve Bannon and Navarro kind of being the precedent for 2029. That's kind of what it looks like to me. It looks like you're going to see people that are in this Trump administration that are either going to get pardons and get let off, and they're going to get hit with state charges, or they're going to go to prison. And the Trump administration, like all the way up to the top, may actually experience that, except the people that are just playing. The people that are playing on both sides. Because what you don't see is any accountability inside that so-called deep state. Jim Comey's indictment, thrown out. Andy McCabe, nothing. Right? Paula Bate, nothing. Chris Wray, nothing. Brennan, Clapper, Obama, nothing. None of those things ever hit. But we can go grab somebody all the way down in Venezuela. And for me, that is truly problematic. Maybe it is for you too. Or maybe you're like, whatever. America First is whatever Donald Trump says. If that's you, that's fine. But just admit that that's what your position is. America First equals trademark. Whatever Donald Trump says is good for me. And that's a totally acceptable position as long as we can acknowledge it up front. Don't convince me otherwise, though. Don't try to convince me that you're actually saying the same thing that I am when I'm just saying I'm just taking you at your word. That's what those plain words mean. We should be addressing issues here domestically. So that's going to be where we're going to go for the day. I've got a funny thing. I have a palate cleanser. It is actually on theme today, but I think it'll actually make you laugh. Just because the idea of taking over your neighbor's house because you're irritated with the way that they do things, quite funny. Again, this is like the mirror test. Hold things up. How do they look? And you know. If you guys are listening on Spotify, thanks so much for being part of that. If you're not, go to KyleSeraphinShow.com if you're listening on the audio anywhere else, and get the video too, because there's some things you might want to see. You might want to see this. I think it's somewhat funny. If you guys want to support our program, you can go to locals. It's KyleSeraphin.com. By going to KyleSeraphin.com, you can sign up and subscribe and be part of our call-in shows that we do on Thursday. Those are going to be there. We're also going to do some segments that will be exclusive gear reviews and stuff like that, because I've been buying some stuff up that I want to show you guys, and prepare for the worst, just in case. Otherwise, if you're watching on YouTube, on Rumble, make sure you guys have a backup option as well. Whether YouTube decides to cancel us, or Rumble, or nobody, or maybe we get kicked off X, I don't know what's going to happen. So subscribe. Support the program there. Give us a like. We'd really appreciate that. Let's do something kind of funny and kind of like snarky, as is our standard here. Let's enjoy this little game of what happens if Tom is really the problem. And me and my house, we've just decided that we're bigger, stronger, and we have better military friends. So we're going to just take over Tom's house and run it our own way, because that's what we like to do.
In a stunning late-night operation, I had some friends of mine execute a raid on my neighbor Tom's house. He put up quite a fight, but we got through, and he's in custody. I haven't liked what he's been doing over there for a while now, so I've decided to run his house myself. He leaves his Christmas lights up too long. He never trims his avocado tree that hangs over my fence, and I believe he's running fentanyl out of there. I can't prove the last one, but it makes sense. I've seen him speak Spanish. I got rid of the wife as well. I didn't really have a problem with her, but we did do a 4th of July block party, and she brought empanadas, so better safe than sorry. I've got them at a Residence Inn a couple towns over. I've been using his home as my own little man cave. Pretty great. It turns out he has a fantastic wine cellar that I have tapped into extensively. Anyway, I'll be running his home until a time when I can have a safe, proper, and judicious turnover to some other guy. Which probably won't be happening soon. And just a heads up, I plan to take over some other neighbors' homes as well. Phil, across the street, has a pretty cool car I'd like to be in charge of. And Alex, who lives catty corner from me, has a wife who's a yoga instructor. Be taking that one soon. Again, doing it for the good of the neighborhood, so stay tuned.
Might is right. If that's what we're doing, at least let's just say it out loud, and then let's take Tom's house, and let's take the other guy's house too, and I guess take the yoga instructor's wife, husband. It's pretty funny. All right, that's it. We can all laugh about that. That's pretty clever. Whether you like it or not is still It's still funny. People are funny. And so we've got a good sense of humor about it all. Let's look to an interesting week. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. For those of you that just celebrated Epiphany, for those of you that are taking down your Christmas decorations like me, God bless all of you. Look forward to seeing you over the next couple days, and we'll continue to discuss all of this stuff as it unfolds. Have a great one.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.
Built on sweat, not sympathy. Long nights carved as legacy. No shortcuts, no guarantee. You earn your spot, you earn your seat. Don't curse the ground, you choose to stand. This place was raised by callous hands. If you hate the noise, the grit, the sound, there's a bigger world outside this town. No excuses, no revision. Say it straight, this is the mission. Bacon, cheeseburger, nationalism. Built on work and conviction. Bacon, cheeseburger, nationalism. Say it loud, say it with conviction. If you can't eat this, you don't belong. This table's set for the strong. Stand your ground, hold your position. Bacon, cheeseburger, nationalism. No silver spoons, no easy ride. Just dirt on boots and stubborn pride. We don't fold when pressure's high. We stand our ground and testify. You don't have to cheer or clap. Just don't tear down what we built from scratch. Respect the code, respect the land. That's the deal, now shake my hand. No fake smiles, no disguise. Say it straight, look me in the eye. Bacon, cheeseburger, nationalism. Hard-earned pride, no permission. Bacon, cheeseburger, nationalism. Built on sweat, not superstition. If you can't eat this, you don't belong. This fire burns all night long. Say it proud, say it loud. Bacon, cheeseburger, nationalism. Work, earn, stand your ground. No free rides. No backing down. Bacon, cheeseburger, nationalism. Simple truth, no translation. Built by hands that never quit, not by words or imitation. If you can't eat this, you don't belong. That's the line, that's the song.